I was 9 years old the night everything shifted. Summer heat pressed against the walls of our house in Birmingham, the kind that made sleep feel impossible. I crept downstairs for a glass of water, my bare feet silent on the steps. That's when I heard them, my parents' voices, low and tired, drifting from the living room. "We can't keep going like this," my mother said, her tone sharp with exhaustion. "3 kids cost too much. We can barely cover Gavin's gear, Reed's tutoring." "It's impossible." I froze, clutching the banister. My father sighed, sounding older than I had ever noticed. "I know. Elaine, God, I know. But what do we do? The mortgage. My job, none of it's enough." Silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then my mother's voice cut through it like a blade. "We need a solution. A solution." The word echoed in my chest. There was a pause, and then my father's reply came, careful and deliberate. "Meredith has that big house in Arkansas. She's alone. She's always asking about the kids. At 9 years old." I didn't fully grasp what they were planning, but I understood enough to know that I was the problem to be solved. Gavin and Reed, my older brothers, were mentioned again: football, college, bright futures. My name never left their lips. The water glass trembled in my hand, and I slipped back upstairs, pressing my ear against the cool pillow. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. That night, for the first time, I realized love could be measured, weighed, and counted, and in their math. I didn't add up. I fell asleep wondering what it felt like to be wanted, not spared. A few weeks later, my parents told me we were taking a summer road trip. They said it like a gift, a surprise just for me. Gavin and Reed would be busy with football camp, but I would get to see my father's sister, Meredith, who lived in Arkansas. I tried to believe it was special, but the memory of their whispered words still clung to me like smoke. The drive felt endless. My parents made small talk about gas prices and work, but no one asked me what I was excited to do. My stomach churned with equal parts anticipation and dread. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Meredith's house rose in front of me like something out of another world. Tall white columns, wide lawns, everything in its place. Meredith stepped outside to greet us, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her blue eyes piercing. But when she looked at me, her face softened in a way I had never seen before. "So this is Annalise," she said, her voice steady yet warm. She crouched down slightly, meeting my eyes directly. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been waiting to meet you, for the first time." Someone wasn't glancing past me toward Gavin or Reed. I felt seen, and the sensation was almost frightening. We went inside, and while the adults spoke in low tones, I explored the room with its polished furniture and shelves of books. Then my father stood. "We should get back on the road." I jumped up, ready to gather my things. But my mother's voice stopped me cold. "Actually, Annalise, you'll stay here with Aunt Meredith for a while." The words struck like thunder. My brothers were home, and I was not. I watched their car disappear down the driveway as Meredith laid a hand on my shoulder. The first nights in Meredith's house felt unreal, like I had stumbled into someone else's life. My room was larger than the space I'd shared with both my brothers, with a canopy bed and wide windows that overlooked a garden. At first, I lay awake, waiting for the sound of my parents' car pulling back into the driveway, but each morning, it was only Meredith's knock on my door, gentle and patient. She asked me questions that startled me: what books I liked, whether I preferred pancakes or eggs for breakfast, what subjects at school were easiest, what made me nervous. At home in Alabama, no one had ever asked me those things. Not really. I found myself answering cautiously, like if I said the wrong thing, she'd lose interest. But she never did. Instead, she leaned in, asked follow-up questions, and remembered what I'd said. We started building small routines. After school, she'd sit with me at the kitchen table while I worked through homework, guiding me when I got stuck instead of brushing me aside. On weekends, she taught me how to measure flour for cookies, how to season food properly. At night, she let me curl up next to her on the couch while old movies played. pointing out which lines had once made her laugh when she was my age. Every gesture told me I mattered, and yet, beneath the warmth, a knot lingered in my chest. Weeks went by without a phone call from Alabama. I tried to convince myself the silence meant my parents regretted their decision, that they were working out a plan to bring me home. Each time the phone rang, my stomach flipped, only to fall again when it was a coworker or a neighbor for Meredith. Still, as days slipped into months, I began to sense that Meredith's presence wasn't temporary. She didn't treat me like a burden she was helping to shoulder. She treated me like her own. It was the first time I felt chosen, though a part of me still ached, waiting for voices that never came. By the time I turned 14, life with Meredith had become steady, almost ordinary. I was settled into school, had a circle of friends, and even played soccer on the weekends. Meredith was at every game, her sharp voice carrying across the field when I scored. For a long time. I convinced myself that was enough, that the emptiness left by my parents' absence didn't matter. But the silence had weight. 6 years of it pressed down until it felt like part of my skin. One evening, after dinner, Meredith cleared the plates and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Her expression was calm, but I could feel the tension in the air. "Annalise," she said carefully, "would you like to see your parents? I can reach out if that's what you want." The question lodged in my chest like a stone. I stared at my hands, twisting a napkin until it tore. Part of me wanted to say yes, to imagine they'd changed their minds, that I'd walk into a room and they would finally pull me close and apologize. But another, louder part of me remembered the endless birthdays without cards, the Christmases without calls, the nights I had gone to bed, hoping the phone would ring. "No," I said at last. My voice shook. But the answer felt solid. If they wanted to see me, they would have tried by now. 6 years. Meredith. Not one word. She nodded slowly, her blue eyes soft with sadness. "Marcus has always been selfish," she admitted. "But none of this is your fault. He failed you, not the other way around." Her words sank deep, though the ache didn't disappear. I carried it upstairs that night, whispering to myself that I would not wait for people who had already let me go. And just as I learned to accept that silence, another shadow began to creep into our home. It started with small things. Meredith would come home from work exhausted, brushing it off as long days at the office. Then she began losing weight, her clothes hanging loose in ways that made me uneasy. By the time she admitted something was wrong, I was 16 and old enough to recognize the fear behind her steady voice when she told me the doctors had found cancer. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the same spot where she once asked if I wanted to see my parents. This time, her face was pale, her hands trembling around a coffee cup. "It's serious," she said quietly, "but I'm going to fight it." In that moment, I understood that the woman who had carried me through everything now needed me to carry her. Our routines changed overnight. I learned how to cook meals that were gentle on her stomach, to keep the house in order when she was too tired to move from the couch. The day I got my driver's license, my first trip wasn't to celebrate with friends, but to take Meredith to chemotherapy. I waited in sterile hospital lobbies, clutching homework I couldn't concentrate on, watching people my age scroll their phones while I memorized medication schedules. Meredith never stopped teaching, even when she was sick. She sat with me and showed me how to balance a checkbook, how to track expenses, how to plan for emergencies. "Money," she said one afternoon, her voice thin but firm, "isn't just numbers, it's control. Never let anyone make you feel powerless because you don't understand it." I absorbed every word, writing notes in the margins of her old finance books. It gave me a strange kind of courage, as if she were handing me tools I would need long after she was gone. Some nights, when she was too weak to climb the stairs, I slept on the couch near her so she wouldn't feel alone. I hated the quiet sound of her labored breathing, the reminder that nothing was certain anymore. And just when it seemed the illness would consume every corner of our lives, the doctors used a word I hadn't dared hope for: remission. When I turned 18, Meredith was already fading again. The remission we had celebrated 2 years earlier had only been a pause, a fragile truce with something relentless. She tried to keep her strength, but I could see it slipping from her in the way she leaned heavier on the banister, in the way her voice thinned by evening, on my birthday. She insisted on baking me a cake, though her hands shook as she measured the sugar. We sat together at the dining table, just the two of us. The cake was lopsided, but to me, it was perfect. That night, she handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace, a gold chain with a simple pendant that had once belonged to her mother. Her eyes glistened as she fastened it around my neck. "You're strong, smart, and kind," she whispered. "Never forget that. No matter what happens, you'll always carry those things with you. They'll protect you more than money ever could." I wanted to believe her strength would hold forever, but months later I was sitting at her hospital bedside, clutching her frail hand as her breathing slowed. She slipped away quietly, like a candle flickering out. The funeral blurred by. Faces I didn't know offering condolences I barely heard. It was Mr. Blackwood, Meredith's lawyer, who sat me down afterward and explained what she had left behind. The house, her accounts. Everything $3 million in total was mine. I should have felt secure, but all I felt was hollow. The walls of the mansion, once filled with her steady voice and careful presence, now echoed with silence. Every room reminded me of her absence. Every object a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. And just as I was beginning to understand what it meant to be alone, there came a knock at the door, 3 days after the funeral. I was still wandering the halls like a ghost, unsure what to do next. When the doorbell rang, my chest tightened as I walked down the long hallway, and when I looked through the glass, my stomach dropped. Standing on the porch were the 4 people I hadn't seen in 11 years, my parents and my brothers. My mother was the first to move. She stepped forward with a bright, brittle smile and reached for me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her arms outstretched. I froze, the smell of lilies from the funeral still clinging to my clothes. My father brushed past me without waiting for permission, his eyes roaming the foyer like he was cataloging it. Gavin and Reed followed, their gazes sweeping over the furniture, the art on the walls, the polished wood floors. "It's good to see you," my father said, settling into a chair as if it were his own. "We're here to make sure you're not alone." I stayed standing, my hands gripping the door frame. "Where were you 3 days ago?" My voice was sharper than I intended. Mother waved her hand lightly. "Oh, Annalise. You know, we had Gavin's promotion party. Everyone was already coming. The catering was paid for. We couldn't cancel something so important." Her words landed with a sickening weight. They had chosen a party over a funeral. Over me. "But we're here now," she added quickly, patting the couch beside her as if I might sit down like a child eager for comfort. "You need your real family." I laughed then, the sound hollow even to my own ears. My real family was buried this week. The words hung between us, and for the first time I saw their smiles falter, though only for a moment, because beneath their rehearsed sorrow, their eyes glittered with something else, entirely hunger. And that was the moment I understood they hadn't come to comfort me. They had come for the house. It didn't take long for their masks to slip. My father leaned back in the chair as though he owned the house. "This estate is too much for a girl your age to handle. As Elizabeth's brother, I should inherit half. It's only fair." Reed smirked and added, "And let's be honest. Annalise, you're 19. What do you know about managing $3 million? The number rang in the air like a warning bell. My mother reached for my hand, her eyes wide with feigned concern. "Sweetheart, you need guidance. We're still your parents. By law. We're your guardians until you're 19 in Alabama." Her words snapped something inside me. 11 years of silence, and now they wanted to claim me again. I excused myself, went upstairs, and pulled out the card Meredith's lawyer had given me at the funeral. My hands shook as I dialed. "Mr. Blackwood, it's Annalise. They're here." They won't leave. I'll be there shortly, he said firmly. Don't sign or agree to anything. 20 minutes later, he walked in, tall and composed, carrying his briefcase like a weapon. My family stiffened at the sight of him. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. I'm Jonathan Blackwood, Ms. Rowan's attorney. I understand there's been some confusion. My father straightened, puffing out his chest. We're not confused. She's still a minor under Alabama law. We're her guardians. Mr. Blackwood opened his case and pulled out documents, his voice calm but unyielding. Annalise has been a legal resident of Arkansas for over a decade. Here, the age of majority is 18. Furthermore, her parents relinquished their rights when Meredith legally adopted her. You have no claim, legal or otherwise, over her or this estate. The silence was sharp, broken only by Reed's angry laugh. This is insane. Mr. Blackwood closed his folder with finality. What's insane is believing you can erase 11 years of neglect with a sudden interest in her bank account. Their faces hardened, and desperation flickered in their eyes as I realized they would not give up easily. After Mr. Blackwood forced them out, I thought it was over, but the calls began almost immediately. Unknown numbers at all hours of the day. Voices I hadn't heard since childhood now trying to thread their way back into my life. Gavin was the first. Look, Annalise, you've got more money than you know what to do with. I'm getting married. All I need is a down payment for a house. It would mean the world to me. His voice was smooth, practiced, as if he were negotiating a deal instead of talking to his sister. Then Reed, I've got a business opportunity, big returns. Guaranteed. You could triple your inheritance if you just back me. The desperation under his bravado was obvious, but he disguised it with bravado, as though I should be grateful for the chance to invest. My mother's calls were the hardest to hear. Her sobs bled through the voicemail. We made a terrible mistake. You're our baby. Annalise, I can't sleep knowing what we did. Please forgive us. We just need help. That's all. Each message was saved, cataloged, and stored, just as Mr. Blackwood instructed, after a month. He sent them a formal cease and desist, outlining every instance of harassment. He warned them that if they continued, we would seek a restraining order. The calls stopped. The silence that followed was jarring, almost louder than their voices had been, for the first time. The house was mine alone. No ringing phone, no echoes of demands, no reminders of the people who had thrown me away. But as the quiet settled in, I felt both relief and unease, as though I were standing in the eye of a storm, unsure if the winds would return. By the time I started college, the weight of those calls and threats had faded into memory. I chose to study finance, not only because it fascinated me, but because it felt like a way to carry Meredith forward. Every lecture, every late night bent over numbers, reminded me of the afternoons she spent showing me how to make sense of money, teaching me that knowledge was protection. The house no longer felt like a tomb. Slowly, I filled it with pieces of my own life friends from campus who came by for study sessions. Shelves lined with books I had chosen. Fresh flowers in the kitchen because Meredith had always loved them. I kept her necklace close, wearing it on exam days, letting it rest against my collarbone like an anchor. Sometimes, when I sat at her desk reviewing case studies, I heard her voice in my mind, calm and steady. Never let anyone make you feel powerless. Those words carried me through the moments I doubted myself, through the nights when loneliness pressed too hard. Blood had abandoned me, but choice had embraced me. Meredith had chosen me when no one else would. And because of her, I learned that family isn't written in DNA. It's built in loyalty, in sacrifice, in the decision to stay when things grow difficult. I live with that truth now. When I lock the front door at night, the sound no longer echoes in an empty house, it seals a home, one built on love that cannot be taken away. In the end, what defines family, the blood that leaves you, or the love that stays? Outline story. Outline title, my parents said 3 kids. Cost too much, then abandoned me. 11 years later, they returned for my $3 million inheritance. Protagonist, Annalise Rowan. 19, strong-willed, sensitive, resilient. Setting starts in Birmingham. Alabama, Aunt's estate in Little Rock, Arkansas. 9-year-old Annalise overhears her parents, Marcus and Elaine Rowan, whispering that 3 kids cost too much. She realizes her brothers, Gavin and Reed, are the priority. Her innocence fractures when she senses she may be the solution. Hook, if love can be measured in dollars. What does that make a child worth? Annalise is taken on a summer trip to visit Aunt Meredith in Arkansas instead of returning. Her parents abandon her. Meredith, a sharp yet warm woman, notices her shock and treats her with dignity. Annalise's grief explodes when she realizes her brothers were kept, not her. Hook. When family leaves you behind, do you chase them or let them go? Meredith gives Annalise real attention, asking about her interests and listening. Annalise experiences love through small rituals, homework help, cooking together, quiet talks, for the first time. She feels chosen, yet she wonders if silence from Alabama means her parents regret it. Hook. What hurts more, the words that cut you, or the silence that follows? At 14, Meredith gently asks if Annalise wants to see her parents. She declines. Realizing 6 years without a single call means the answer is clear. Meredith admits her brother Marcus was always selfish, but assures Annalise she is not to blame. Hook. Can a wound ever heal if the knife is never removed? Meredith falls ill with cancer. Annalise, now 16, takes over household duties, drives her to treatment, and grows into strength through caregiving. She learns financial lessons from Meredith: budgeting, responsibility, independence. Hook. When the one who saved you begins to fade, how do you prepare to stand alone at 18? Annalise receives Meredith's heirloom necklace and words of pride. You're strong, smart, and kind. Never forget that. Months later, Meredith dies. The will leaves Annalise a $3 million estate. Grief collides with fear as she faces the empty mansion. Hook. Is an inheritance a blessing, or just another way for grief to echo? Days after the funeral, her parents and brothers appear. Fake smiles, forced hugs, and greedy eyes betray them. They settle in like owners, claiming she needs her real family now. Their absence at the funeral reveals their true colors. Hook. When ghosts return wearing familiar faces, do you welcome them or bolt the door? They demand access to the thream, claiming guardianship. Annalise calls Meredith's lawyer, Mr. Blackwood, who dismantles their arguments. She's legally adopted, a legal adult in Arkansas, and sole heir. The family's outrage turns desperate. Hook. When the law silences lies, will greed ever truly accept defeat? Her family harasses her with calls and guilt trips. Gavin wants a house. Reed wants business money. Her mother sobs about mistakes. Annalise keeps records. And Blackwood sends a cease and desist. The silence afterward is heavy but freeing. Hook. When silence returns, is it peace or just the calm before another storm, now in college? Annalise studies finance, honoring Meredith's legacy. She reflects that blood abandoned her, but choice embraced her. Meredith's voice still guides her. Proving family is loyalty, not DNA. She locks the door to her home with quiet certainty. Hook. Final. In the end, what defines family? The blood that leaves you, or the love that stays?